Sarah Davey.
And I'm James Routledge.
And this is Books Unpacked.
Join us as we chat to people from across the publishing industry to unpack the life cycle of a book.
Pop the kettle on, get comfy, and we'll get started.
Jacky, thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to see you.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you for this opportunity to, I know we haven't seen each other for a while and a chance to talk with you both. Fabulous. And around books and things to do with books, well, it couldn't be anything better, could it?
It's lovely. So I think you and James know each other quite well from sort of book-related events.
Fairly well, yeah. So Jacky and I, we met for the first time through Newcastle Noir.
Yeah.
And through my time at Forum Books. So we'll definitely talk a bit about the festival. I'd love to talk a little bit about and your relationship with the bookshop. And
beautiful, yeah.
And kind of getting your author's books on sale. Yeah. But Sarah, did you want to maybe start us off with a bit of an intro?
Yeah, so it's just because I don't know you very well. I know who you are, Dr Noir. It's that weird thing, I know who you are. Sounds a bit creepy, but it really isn't. But if you just tell us what you do, and I'm interested in what you do for sort of your day job, and then how you've gone into the book world from that.
Okay, well, as James quite rightly said, my entry into the book world was with Newcastle Noir and the festival, and that began because I was set a challenge at work. So I used to work at Northumbria University for many years, and the department that I was in, it was one of those subject areas of should it remain or should it be resigned to history. And I was given the challenge of, if I give you something to do, because I was a little bit vocal about that being assigned to a bottom drawer. If I give you something to do, will you be quiet? And the challenge I was set was to look into something new. Now, in a previous life, I'd been very much into all things Nordic. And this was at the time when The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo had recently come out, and The Bridge and The Killing, those sort of like defining crime fiction, film and TV moments. And so I thought, I wonder about a book club at Newcastle Library, which is still going strong. So this conversation was had in about 2010-11, and that book club is still going on at Newcastle Library, which is wonderful. We meet once a month and we discuss crime fiction in translation, and related books as well. When there's a book that we just think we have to discuss that, even if it's not the only thing that we say is that it should be set in Europe. And that's the only stipulation these days. And I developed a couple of modules as well at work around crime fiction in translation and European crime film and TV. So that's really how I sort of got into that. And then from that, having seen, festivals like Harrogate and Crime Fest and Bloody Scotland, these big, amazing festivals. But I have this mentality of who gets access to cultural events, who gets access to books and stories. And well, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that I can always afford, the transport, the accommodation, the event costs. I can't always do that. And I want people to be able to say, oh, look, there's that author that I love their work. And, and this event's a £5. I don't necessarily have to go for the whole festival, but this festival's on my doorstep. I can go and listen to whoever. And that's, sort of like the ethos of everything that I want to do is, everybody should have an opportunity to spend time together, because again, all about community, time together and time around books and authors that, have lit up their life in one way or another.
It's that feeling, isn't it? Because I'm just starting to work with Hexham Book Festival programme and the Kids Festival and the Schools Festival. And I really feel like that kids really need that. Well, everyone does, but that opportunity to meet someone when you see young people meeting someone when they've read the book and they're like, this is a real person, it's totally transformative. And especially in the Northeast, where if we want to be a writer, we don't see writers that sound like us,
Exactly.
you know, or
Yeah.
live here. Yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly, you know, back in the day, that was exactly the thing, you know. And I think, you know, over the decades, so, you know, more authors do seem to come to events, you know, signing events and things like that, which is great. But just to say, you know, and I don't want to belabor the economic side of it, but I do think that's, I mean, I think it's important both sides, but just thinking, for many people, a fiver can be the difference of what am I putting on the kitchen table for Sunday lunch or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, those of us that are lucky that don't have to maybe always think about, if I spend a fiver now, what does that mean? But for some people, it's like, you know, it can make or break being able to make it through the week. And I really believe that culture should not just be the privilege of those of us who maybe have had a, you know, a better hand in life at a certain point, because it's the thing that does us all good. You know, it's like you say, when, you know, when kids meet that person who has only been the name on the back of a book, or they might have seen an interview on YouTube or something like that, and then they're there in the room, you know, it's this flesh and blood, and all that that can mean, you know, all that inspiration that that can bring, then yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a bit
And you get
emotional.
that kind of, yeah, you get that kind of reaction, that kind of emotional response with grown-ups,
Yes.
with kind of crime fiction, especially. You've got these passionate readers,
Yeah.
and they get very it can get quite cliquey, can't it? Some of these festivals where you kind of see maybe some of the same faces, and you see the same names quite often. I think what I loved about Newcastle Noir, especially some of those earlier years, were um, the 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 diversity of the panels you were getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, there was a Mexican crime writing panel.
So
I mean, obviously, Scandi and kind of Nordic crimes being huge. How let's get into the kind of nuts and bolts of it a
okay.
little.
Okay.
So obviously you're wanting to kind of be quite far reaching with this festival. You want to be as kind of diverse as possible. I mean, where, as a festival organizer, where do you start? How do you start with that process? Do you kind of just reach out to publishers and hope for the best? I mean, can you give us shine a bit of a light on that?
Sure, sure. And I know everybody's experience is different in how it works, and you know, and every festival has its own personality. But I think for me, I started by going to festivals and volunteering, you know, being the person that showed people to their seats, or volunteering in the green room, so you get to know people. And then interviewing authors and getting to know authors that way. And, you know, being able to say, oh, you know, there's this little festival, you know, in Newcastle. Would you, would you come along? Um, and so it started like that, of approaching. And again, I know it's not the orthodox way of doing it, but I would ask authors, because I think, you know, 10 years ago, which is when it all started, um, it felt more organic in a way than it is now. But I'm lucky that as the years have gone on, I now get the emails from publishers saying, "Can I recommend, you know, this author to you?" And it's really hard, because I'm a bit like, the club's never closed, and it frustrates the life out of my lovely colleagues at Newcastle Library. Because if I could, I think I could run a week-long festival. There's so many authors would like to come, but of course, it's logistically and financially, it, you know, it's not realistic. And so it's, you know, I'm really glad now that, you know, I mean, just yesterday somebody wrote and said, can I pitch an author to you, a debut author, because that's something else that I'm really keen on. You know, that idea of human beings are storytellers, because it's the way we started to communicate way back when. And I find it a little bit difficult, and it's no disrespect to those, those really big names that always appear on bookshelves and in supermarkets and whatever. But there are some fabulous stories to be heard. And if we don't give people a space and a time to do it, then I fear that, some people's great storytelling is assigned, to their family and maybe the local bookshop, and not moving beyond, and being able to share their storytelling with other people. So yeah, I think I've learned now over the years that it's better if if you talk to the publisher and not just say to the author, will you come? Because of course the author would love to come, but it's, can the publisher support, either with accommodation or with travel. I know, like I say, we don't make profit at all. And whilst wanting to recognize that author's contribution, so we'll pay a set fee, and I want to try and raise that fee, but it's balancing the books. And you talked about diversity, James, and it's again trying to ensure within the space of a certain number of days that you can get those diverse voices, and also that those diverse voices are free to attend. I've seen over the years, at various points on certain social media, people railing about the fact, we didn't see or we didn't hear from, but those authors might have been approached and couldn't make it that weekend, or those, or to that festival or this festival. I think it's not that festivals are unaware. It's understanding that maybe not, people might not be able to make it. It's not that you don't want those, as many voices as possible. So I do try every year to mix it up, bring people that haven't been before. And I have a wonderful colleague, Frances Walker, without whom none of this would be possible, I always like to say, and she really keeps me in a good place. I mean, I'm sure we all have authors whose work we love and whose personalities we find uberly endearing. And she'll always say to me, they've been before. Do you think people want to hear them again? Shouldn't we have someone different? What about such a body? Their work's just come out, or they've not been for X number of years. Maybe people would like to hear from them. And it's again that tricky dilemma. If you wheel out certain people, they're going to attract an audience. I mean, they could read from the phone book and they would attract an audience because of their work and because of, people love what they do, and they've taken a place in people's hearts, and that's brilliant. But again, it's that thing of finding a balance that says, do we just want to replicate what we've always done? Sorry, sir.
No, it's all right. No, it's really interesting, especially, I suppose there's two things I want to talk, if you're all right to talk a little bit more about, is structure, because obviously one of the things that you talked about, debuts and big authors, people normally at a festival need to sell tickets to make money to pay for it. If that stress was gone, they would be able to put a bit of everything on, wouldn't there? And it's really difficult. So does the way that you're structured, where are you a not-for-profit, does that make it a bit more flexible from your point of view? Does it mean that you're then able to do what you want to do with the festival? And if you did it in more of a profit way, would you then maybe have
very
to
much so? I really do believe that. And what you did and when you did it and how you did it. So, the festival is not the biggest festival. It's not the jazziest of festivals. I like to call it the IKEA of crime fiction festivals. You know what a Billy bookcase looks like. It's going to do the trick. It'll hold the books. It's not an antique piece of furniture that's been, but in a way, what I love to hear, and again, just this past December, and people saying it's a space filled with love and acceptance and community, and that both from authors and readers. and authors who I know could go, they could be, as I've said, Harrogate, bloody Scotland, Crime Fest, and draw audiences in their hundreds, but they'll say, but it's lovely coming here. And I like that. It's like I don't think because of that financial side, I couldn't do the massive things. It couldn't be bells and whistles. But if it's that, and especially that northeast feel of come on in, sit yourself down, have a cuppa, how you doing? And that makes me happy.
Yeah, and there's space in the UK for all different shapes and
Yeah,
sizes of festival, aren't there? If you want to go to Harrogate,
exactly.
well, you know
And
where it
again,
is.
I think that is so important. A bit like, every human being, every person has their personality, their physicality. There's no one right or wrong way of being, and if you're a bit of a festival groupie, then you do want difference when you go around, because you'll get this or that, or it'll be this venue or that venue, um or the format might be different. I know this last year we decided that we'd do a couple of fun events for free beforehand. So we played Myrtle. We had an hour of Myrtle, and then we had an hour of the kangaroo court. Mary Hannah was an excellent sport, I have to say. And that idea of, again, bringing people in for some fun. It might have been the only thing that they could have maybe got to, because paying for something might have not been possible. But there was a couple of authors there. They got a chance to chat with them as well.
I think what is great at these festivals is that sense of community. And I think Newcastle's really harbored that kind of community with its visitors, because you get regular
Yeah,
visitors
yeah.
who come every year. And they're like part of the
That's right.
family
It's
now,
almost
aren't
like, if there's been times, of course, when people might not have been able to make it, and it's like, oh, they're missing. And if we're allowed to say, I know, like for yourself, James, I know people were like, oh, oh, where's James?
they?
Because again, forming that thing of, your personality, your support of the authors, the way you talk to customers, festival goers, just again that thing of, it's you hear an author speak, you want to get their writing. You might not have their latest book, you might not, and so that bookseller being part of that as well, that it's not just let's wheel in a company that sells books that nobody knows, and then they're gone. But it's, as you say, it's like there's certain fixtures.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I do think one of the best parts of the festival is the bookstall. And I always love, no matter where I go, is to kind of see what's on offer and see what's available, because you are obviously you're showcasing and you're offering a platform
Yeah,
to debut authors, certainly authors from further afield than the Northeast. So there's names on the bookstall
yeah,
that you won't have seen before. And that's the same as going into a bookshop, where they've carefully curated the stock, and you are gonna find new books there. And I think that is a really exciting thing. And what is sometimes um, quite a harsh reality with the big festivals is that you kind of get to see the same names over and over again, don't you? So sometimes
yeah,
it's the smaller
yeah.
ones that do
And
offer
I think, you
this
mentioned before about
variety.
crime fiction readers. I mean, they are voracious. There's no doubt about it. you know and not only that, I think they are very open as well, because I think there's a sense of, okay, we know authors that can do this kind of puzzle thing, this find out who did it or whatever. You're new. Can you do it as well? That's that willingness to
Yeah.
try and to listen. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, having that space there, those tables laid out with books, because if you say you can only make an afternoon, and the authors who were on previously, or they're going to be on after, but you get a chance to see that work as well. Yeah, but it's a bit like one of those naughty sweet shops, isn't it? You just think, well, one of them, one of them, one of them. And so often you see on social media people saying, I went to a festival and, I was only going to, and I came away with, a suitcase full of books.
Yeah.
James said literally the same thing when we were chatting earlier, that people were leaving Noir with suitcases stacked with them. Yeah.
And I mean, as a bookseller, obviously that's an amazing thing, but as a festival organizer, I mean, that must be
it really is
fantastic to
lovely.
see.
And again, I don't want to sound biblical or evangelical, but it's the word going out, isn't it? Somebody's come to a festival, heard an author. Let's take that notion of a debut author, and they've taken that book, and most people, unless they are book hoarders, nothing wrong with that, they'll probably pass on that book to a family member, a friend. It might make its way into a local charity shop. It might, so that life of a book and who then gets touched by those words, so it's like, people coming in, but it's then what they take away with them. It's
this whole it's what we're talking about, the life cycle of a book, really, the ecosystem of all the different, we realize it's circular, but it's not a circle.
It's wiggly and in and out, because from the inception to production, the dissemination, and then the consumption, all that, it's almost like circles within circles.
What we're discovering as we go along is actually how kind of multifaceted and certainly quite layered most people's jobs are, or we started describing them almost like chains within the link, or link within the chain, I should say. So if somebody, let's say we've spoken to an agent, and then that kind of feeds into your kind of editorial. We've kind of talked a bit about editorial, then marketing and publicity, and then now I guess we're talking about events, but it's not, it's more than events, isn't it? I guess it kind of feeds back into that cycle, because you've got readers and writers coming to your
and it's almost
festival.
like if just make me think those points on the globe where two oceans meet, and what happens with those currents, when or salt and sea, with salt water and fresh water meeting, and what that then creates. I think it's important, and people say it constantly for authors, write what you know, and don't write the trend of the moment, because the trend constantly shifts and changes. But I wonder to what extent, attending a festival, as an author, people come, they want their book signed, there's a nice conversation. I wonder to what extent are authors influenced by what they hear their readers say about what they produce? Because I'm thinking about the influence on the writer, the agent, the editor, the publisher. But what about that feedback, from those who probably, I mean, because unless you read for a living, most people read for pleasure. And people are under pressure to produce something as a reader, you're not under pressure. You can do that it's a beautiful moment to, connect with the text and what that does to you.
It's a good way of looking at it, because from like a writer's perspective, when your work's not published, you've got like ultimate freedom. I mean, you want to be published, but you're not thinking necessarily. And then at a festival, when people are there to talk about a book, the book will have been out for, they wrote the book 2 years ago. That's how long publishing takes. Chances are they've already written another book, which might be out to publishers or might be coming. So that's why it's kind of important to see what people think, like, on the ground, I think. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, it's just really interesting thinking about that kind of the scope of where the reader sees the author at the event, but actually what else is going on.
Because again, the difference between the industry and the public, and I often wonder about this join, and is there a join, or is there a bit of a disjuncture between industry and general public? The case in point being what you sometimes see on book jackets of, where they give you that line of the latest whoever, or if you liked such a body, you'll like this. And I understand the need to sell books, because if we're not selling books, then we're not, it's not happening. But where is there that, again, coming back to that organic freedom, like you say, so if I'm not writing for anybody but me, I can let things roam at will. Being a published author out there does appear to have certain parameters within which you have to create and you have to deliver, and also then and then you have to perform, because if you don't, then to what extent is your journey as an author, or your exposure as an author? I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but if certain aspects aren't being fulfilled, I wonder, are you going to get known? I know, sort of like with some older authors, and I totally understand, because we are products of our generations and what generations do, and saying to older authors, you are going to have to get on social media, whether it feels comfortable or not. If you want to be heard and you want to be known, beyond your own town or city, you do need to do this.
Yeah. Which kind of, in the traditional eyes of the industry, that's what your publicity and marketing team should be doing. And getting books into bookshops was actually the limit of your exposure. People would browse books in a bookshop only. That's the only way you get to see that material, is actually browsing the bookshelves. That's entirely different now,
totally. And how we consume literature as well. The sense of, do we listen? I love the notion of an audiobook. It takes me back to childhood, being read to, which I think is wonderful. A story stays with me so much better if I've heard it than I read it. Oh, without a doubt. So my parents live in South Wales, and so the journey between Edinburgh and all that way down, I can tell you, for example, certain points in the road, where I was reading a James Oswald book, and I can tell you what was happening in that book at that point on the road. It's or who else was there? Jussi Adler Olsen. So just as I'm coming through a point in mid Wales, and the book had the notion of hunting, but the targets were human beings and not animals. And it's and it's there as I do that part of the road. It's always there. So I think storytelling, getting those stories out, those stories to the public, how we do it has changed.
And that's where the festival, the appearances of authors is, because you get that extra bit of information, that insight. And quite often when you get to meet the author and hear them speaking about the book, I mean, we've done books at the bookshop together, and then our chair events now, and James chairs events. And when you get, sometimes it doesn't go very well, but sometimes you just get something, you go, this is, I tell you, it was the one I probably enjoyed most was Kirsty Logan, because I could have talked to her for a year, but you didn't need to ask her anything. She'd just, but the audience loved it. And when you get that, an author who's so into writing and's got so much to give, and it's really special.
It is. I would say it's a magic. To me, there is a sweet spot often at an event, especially if you've got more than one author on the stage, and those authors start to talk together, and you can just, and you just feel that the audience go, oh wow, they actually, and that I love to aim for that, and it not just be asking questions to three separate people.
Jackie, I was wondering if we could talk a bit more about your chairing and your interviewing, because you're also a voracious reader, you know. I mean, we've talked before about sometimes at the start of a festival, you've still got some books to read for the end of the festival, but you just plow through them, and sometimes it's an
There
overnight
have been
kind of
some
job.
festivals where there has been no sleep. But again, the
Yeah.
audio book as well. I know especially for Bloody Scotland, one time, two of the authors, they had quite thick books. And I knew that I would struggle more turning the page than I would listening and putting it onto 1.5, and then just
Sure.
Oh, is that what you do? Oh, 'cause so it's just really interesting, the audiobook. I can't listen to audiobooks because I'm not very good at when I sit and read a book, it's the only thing I do. But if I've got the audiobook in, I can't just sit and listen. But if I do something else,
you won't be focused on,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
take it
yeah,
in. Yeah, but I didn't think about making it a
yeah,
bit
yeah,
faster.
because then
That's quite
you
interesting.
have to hang in with it, and it because it progresses the
Oh, yeah.
pages. But what I find with that is, you talk about doing different things. It's easier to take notes whilst listening. Now, I don't know whether that comes from living, in the world of higher education and taking notes in lectures and things like that. But that's a way. Whereas if I'm on a page, so I'm reading the page, I have to stop, write, come back to the page. So that's how I,
Yeah.
sometimes it speeds things up for me, and I can cope with those. Oh, what am I going to do? I
Yeah.
sorry, no.
What do you sorry, what do you prefer, James?
I like it when I've got the luxury of time, and if it's a short enough book to do so, I'll read it twice. I'll try and read it for pleasure,
And do that, yeah.
and then I'll go back and take notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Often it's so last minute, or it doesn't get offered to me until fairly late doors. So then maybe I've got to read it the night before, in which case it's
Yeah.
just blast through it. And you pick up a lot when you try and
Yeah.
force yourself to
Yeah.
read quickly. Far more than I would have thought I would. Years ago, before I'd started doing a bit more of this, it was, no, I need to take like a week.
Yeah.
Give me a week. Give me a week to enjoy it, and then go back and kind of swat up a bit. But yeah, now it's a
Do
bit
you
of
know,
a
and as you
speedier
were saying
process for
that, I
me.
think the idea of what remains that is to be discussed, it's like things
Yeah,
pop
yeah.
out. And so there your questions start to formulate. And I'm a big believer in this, I don't know if you've ever been at festivals or events where person asking the questions of the authors that the public have turned up to see seems to be spending way more time formulating questions and talking about their own experience rather than letting the authors talk. It's a bit different, I think, if you've got a participating author in a festival. That's a different kettle of bananas. But when you've got that thing of you're a chair, you're a conduit, you're dropping breadcrumbs, it's not your gig, and that helps me so much. It's not like standing up and giving a lecture where if I don't remember or don't get it right, it's on me. I love that thing that, like, no, please, you tell the people about your work. You share about these things.
Yeah.
I was at a festival last year, the Prima Donna Festival down south, and I was actually on the other side of the chair of being interviewed, and it was horrendous. I had two authors. So one author was the interviewer, and I was on with an author myself. And I just kept wanting to ask the authors questions. Like, shush, you want to ask him? Just answer the questions. Oh, sorry. Oops.
I love it when, you start getting on so well during the conversation that you
Yeah.
can feel comfortable talking over each other a little bit, and there is some kind of,
Yes. Yeah.
the sparks flying slightly, and that's when I think people start to relax.
Yeah.
and they come out with something that otherwise they might have been slightly unsure about or uncomfortable about, but they
Without a
feel
doubt.
comfortable
And I
about it.
think it's that triangulation as well. So you've got an audience who, you know, in a public space, in no control over the event. And so we all bring nerves to that of the what might happen. And then, you know, the author, you know, unless there's a seasoned performer, are going to bring nerves, and even somebody who's, you know, been on the stage a lot. And I think, again, that idea of the interviewer, the chair, the moderator, it's so important to put the audience at rest. And as you say, when you get in that conversation and the audience can see, oh, the author's enjoying this. The author's not, you know, like, and everybody then just eases down in the chair. And it's a much more enjoyable experience.
How much opportunity do you have to chat to authors beforehand? I've had a few different experiences where I've had a lovely chat and then we go out and have a lovely chat and it all works. And then I haven't had an opportunity to chat and it feels a bit like, oh, what do you prefer
I love the
beforehand? What do you
question.
feel like works?
I usually say to, you know, because at some festivals or events, they send you the email beforehand, weeks beforehand. You know, these are your authors, and some authors want the questions beforehand, which again, everybody's different. I understand it, but you know, I love my preference is the blind date. Yeah. Exactly that you know, I don't want to ask you the questions I'm going to ask you. I want you to respond without thinking. Okay. I want you to be off the cuff and I want it to be natural. You know, I don't want this studied, measured thing. Just again, you know, like, you know, we're here, we're having a cuppa, you know, you're at my kitchen table or, you know, in my lounge. Oh, there's an audience of people out there, but never mind them. Talk to me. It's the first time we've met each other. I love interviewing people that I've met before, but I prefer interviewing an author I've never met because of that blind date feel. Mm-hmm. Because then I'm curious. I want to know. You know, and I feel like there's no holds barred in a way. I mean, I would never be inappropriate or anything like that. But I feel like talking about their work, I can go anywhere. And I can leave, you know, I can leave this moment knowing you and your work so much better. Because I think as well for a reader, either I've read this book and now I want to know why the author did what they did or why, or I haven't yet read this book and because I've now heard this author speak about X, Y, and Z, I feel that that's my job as an interviewer, for the audience to go away thinking, oh, so now I never knew why they chose that moment in the book. It made no sense, and now I get it. Or I now have to go and get that book because I want to go in deeper and find out why.
Oh, I feel like I'm getting like a masterclass. I'm doing an event in a couple of weeks, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna blind date it. Sorry, James, I'm gonna blind date it. It's Jacky's fault.
Jackie, I'm curious. What draws you to crime fiction?
Well, other than the
anything
fact,
else?
as we said, you know, a wee while ago, I was sort of like channeled into that direction. But I think even before then, my previous studies contained a good crime fiction element because for me, it's a way of looking at society. And I know this has been spoken at in lots of ways, and by lots of people. But I think looking at, not only for clever writing, you know, beautiful ways of dispatching of people, things like that, but usually the underlying issues of, you know, what are people, for example, what are people in Spain concerned about? And that will come out, you know, underlying currents, trends, traits, they're there, you know, while somebody's trying to, yes, we're all worried about a serial killer that, you know, we might be the next victim. But really, what are the social issues, you know, around immigration, around housing, around, you know, social mobility, whatever that might be. That's what I love, that you get a great story, but you get those other aspects that you then, I know, like at the book club that I mentioned, we often say, so here's a book that's written in Norway. Does it speak Norway to you? Or could it have been written anywhere?
Mhm.
And we just happen to know that the author's Norwegian. Or is this the kind of book that takes you somewhere else? So again, especially if you don't have the opportunities to travel, if an author does this trick of, I've walked around the mean streets of Oslo, thank you very much, without having to spend, an arm and a leg on a pint of beer. This is beautiful that this has been a travel book as well as a really deep, dark mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the other aspect is, for the most part, unless it's somebody trying to do a really postmodern thing, which is lovely, but that when that final page is closed, evil will have been dealt with, justice will have been served.
Mm-hmm.
And in the crazy times that we're living in, with so much unrest and so much unease, to have a character who has made things better for everyone, is such a satisfying read. The baddie's been got and put away. The person that was abducted has been found and is safe and restored to their family. Or the those people in authority, who are not behaving in a way as they should. The light has been shed upon them, and they've been disgraced, and they're out of office. Things like that. I think crime fiction gives us a chance to dream.
There's a lot of people reading more crime during lockdown because of that
Yeah.
kind of resolution, don't you think?
I hadn't even thought about like that. This is my like weird. It's like a terrible admission, but I don't read crime. It's one of the only genres I probably don't, crime and romance.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
watch crime
Yeah.
shows all the time, and it's for that, isn't it? It's that reason, because like we're watching The Killing at the moment, the first season of it. We know that they're going to catch them eventually. It's taken forever. But we do know that by the end, someone's going to get caught, and that's why we keep. Honestly, I feel like I'm having like a philosophical crime awakening. This is
but that
brilliant.
is exactly it. And to think, and the difference between a book and a TV series and the film. A book, unless you are a voracious reader, it's not going to be over in a day usually. But then on TV, until we got The Bridge and The Killing, and again, it's been spoken about at length, but most crime dramas, especially the US crime dramas, they'd be done in an episode. So you've got the quick fix. Or now at the minute, I've noticed with Silent Witness, they're the two episodes, and it's and then we get the closure. So that it's almost like the difference between food. Do you need to go get some fast food, or can you spend time on a lovely 5-course meal? And we are offered crime fiction, film, TV in so many different forms, which is great. But as I say, most often not. We know who did it, we know why they did it, and we see, I think, need for closure and justice.
Mm-hmm.
And that space as well, it's remembering that this thing about people are snooty about genre fiction sometimes, but it's brilliant writing, because the reason the TV series works so well is because you get to know the characters. It isn't just about the crime and the resolution. It's the embattled detective and all of their messy lifestyle, and that's what you get in the crime books, and that sense of place, and they're just as valid as every other type of fiction.
We talked about community at the festival, but community in the book, and you as the reader being drawn into that community or into that series, whereby, why do we watch Vera? Well, of course we want to see Vera solve the crime, but we also want to see how Vera interacts with the people she works with. But we also want to see how Vera operates, or acts when she's, without that typical family setting. How does this amazing person who gets to the heart of everything, and yet is this lone, you know, and maybe I'm a reader who's lone, you know, who lives alone. I'm on my own, you know, but hey, you know, I can identify and see. That's why if we come back to those things about those diverse voices, you know, how important it is to see myself on the page, hopefully not as the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, when authors write from the killer's point of view, yeah, identify with that. But you know, the stories set all over. So when publishers, and I understand again those constraints, where when publishers often say, and again, no disrespect to anybody down south who's publishing, but when they say we've already got a northern whatever, you know, and it's a bit like, do you know, there's more than there's more than one city in the north. There's more than one community, one identity, one, you know, it's not, please don't just tick a box. You know, don't miss out on a cracking story just because, oh dear, it's from Manchester. It's set in Manchester. We've already got.
Jackie, what's next for you at the moment then? Because I mean, obviously you're chairing other events. How long does the planning process take for Newcastle Noir? Because you've got a ticking clock, I appreciate, but what is it,
10.
11 months
It'll be
to
10,
go?
won't
10
it?
months to go?
It's 10 months. And here we go with that tricky, because last year, of course, people were saying, can we come? Authors, that is, and saying, I'm sorry, I have no space. Can I put you down for next year? So even before the planning starts, there are a list of names of people who would like to come. And then along the way, there might be other people, and you can't bump people off a list. You know, you know, it's again going back to the dating. It's not, I'm really sorry, but I've met somebody, you know, who fascinates me more. Not interested in you anymore.
Yeah,
just terrible. So there's that difficulty of trying to say we have to stop at that number, and that often happens way before. But then something that I'm really aware of as well, the publicity part of it. So, you know, there's not a big publicity machine around. There's a small number of us that do it. But I'm also aware of the time, like the festival calendar throughout the year. So trying not to talk about it when other festivals are about to start, choosing the moment, knowing when people might be able or wanting to buy tickets. And again, I think something that's emerged from COVID is people waiting right to the last minute. You know, so putting out all the, you know, so the dates have gone out, people know the dates. But you usually find it's in the last 2 weeks before that people actually buy tickets or passes. You know, so forward planning is really important, but often it's that those last few weeks that actually make the difference.
Yeah.
Panels. So you have that, let's say 60 authors, but who do you put together? How does it work? Because it's not only their work, but it's also who can make it on what day at what time. And I don't know what it is.
Sure.
But God's goddesses, the universe, it's been very rare that it's not worked one way or another.
I mean, let's, you know, we'll not
no question.
I'm touching wood. Yeah. I'm touching good IKEA
let's
wood.
Let's not question it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best kind only. Jackie, I feel like we could talk to you forever, but we've already had
I'm
this
sorry.
quite a while. No. I was going to say, James, I feel like we should definitely come to see you again at Noir this year and do something else, like come back and like follow up maybe at the festival and
that
speak
would be
to you
wonderful.
Again. But I wondered if you might, we're thinking about again the links in the chain of the book industry. Who do you think we should talk to next who we might not have thought of in the book industry apart from someone like yourself?
Or maybe who do you deal with directly who might be a good sort of transition for us if we're thinking of this as a bit of a series, then who would you pass us on to?
And there are so many people I would say talk to, but the name that keeps coming back to me, and I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to her, is author and festival establisher Alice Hawkins, the Welsh author. She is one of the founding establishers of the Gwyl Crime Cymru, the Welsh crime fiction festival based in Aberystwyth.
Okay.
I just think again she has, that interesting perspective of the wanting something to happen in Wales. So I think, a regional or national, regional, however you see it, voice, and all that they took into account of planning a festival and what they wanted to achieve with that. But seeing it, of course, from an author's perspective.
That's brilliant. I just love this idea of all these people making things happen, and all the little sparks.
And it was very much a thing that came out of. I mean, the seeds were sown before, but it's a thing that festival developed during COVID, so that they've got this thing whereby it's a year online and a year in person.
See, I do like that, because I've been involved with things that have kind of petered off because of that, and I think a lot of things started in lockdown and brought people together, and it's really important to keep that there, because not everyone wants to or can access things in person. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Jackie, we could just keep talking, but we're gonna have to. We better have, because I've got a dissertation student that I meant to see at 4 o'clock. So.
Okay, right. Let's wrap up then.
It's super busy. I really appreciate your time. Jackie, thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And I look forward to when we can continue again.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you learned something new, like we always do.
Follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our Substack to be the first to hear more.
And you can find us in all the places you usually find your podcasts.
Until next time, keep reading.